I never thought my wedding day would mark the beginning of my greatest challenge. But as I stood at the altar, ready to say my vows, I looked up to see my parents, the people who had always been my foundation, walking out of the church. No words, no goodbye, just their backs turning on me, all because I chose love over legacy. My name is Ariana, and at 32, I was supposed to be the embodiment of everything my family dreamed of. Successful, married to a man with a prestigious name, and continuing the family legacy. But instead, I made a choice that would change everything. I married Alex, not because he had wealth or status, but because he had something far more important: integrity, passion, and a heart full of dreams. To my family, that wasn't enough. On the day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life, my family turned their backs on me. The people I thought I could always count on, the ones who had been there through everything, chose to walk out of my wedding. The pain I felt in that moment was overwhelming. But little did I know, that moment would ignite something in me I didn't even know existed. I watched them leave, their footsteps echoing in the silence of the church, and I felt the weight of their disappointment. In that instant, everything changed. My parents' rejection wasn't just a painful blow, it was a wake-up call. It told me that I had to stop living for their approval and start living for myself. That moment of betrayal, as crushing as it was, sparked a fire inside me. I realized that I didn't need their validation. I would prove to myself and to them that I could build a life of my own, on my own terms. The first few months after the wedding felt like a blur. Alex and I moved into a small apartment in a neighborhood that barely felt like home, surrounded by uncertainty and the weight of starting over. But amidst the chaos, I discovered something I didn't expect: peace. The kind of peace that only comes when you stop living for the approval of others and start living for yourself. We didn't have much: no expensive cars, no high-end clothes, no lavish dinners. But we had each other, and that was enough. It was enough to remind me that I could still build something real, something that wasn't defined by what others expected of me. Still, I couldn't escape the whispers. Family members who once embraced me now avoided me. Friends who used to be close drifted away. Every glance they gave me was filled with pity eyes that told me I had failed, that I was destined to live in Alex's shadow. "You'll never make it, Ariana," they'd say, though rarely out loud. It wasn't the words that stung, but the look, the silent judgment that cut deeper than anything anyone could say. In the quiet of the nights, I questioned everything. Was I just a failure? A disappointment? But then, one evening, something changed. Something deep inside me flickered to life. The thought came to me like a spark: real estate. It wasn't the most glamorous idea, and I didn't have a single connection in the industry, let alone the money to get started. But I had something more valuable: a burning desire to prove them wrong. To prove to myself that I wasn't just a mistake, that I could build something on my own, something that could stand the test of time. I spent every waking moment learning. I read books, attended seminars, and reached out to anyone who could teach me about the business. Alex, who had always believed in me, supported me in every step. He didn't have the answers, but his faith in me was enough to keep going. One day, after months of learning and networking, I found my first opportunity. A small building in a neighborhood that was just starting to show potential. It wasn't much, but it was mine. And for the first time in a long while, I felt a spark of excitement. I remember standing outside that building, looking up at it, thinking, this is it. This is where it all begins. But success wasn't instant. Far from it. The first deals were difficult. The investors turned me down. The banks said no. It felt like the world was telling me that I wasn't meant for success, that I didn't belong in this world. But in those moments of doubt, I held on to one thing: I refused to quit. So, I kept going. I started with one small property, then another. Slowly, it began to click. Word got around. People started taking me seriously. But the hardest part was still ahead of me. My family didn't know about any of this. They still thought I was just the poor little girl who married the wrong guy. But that was about to change. Months passed, and I was finally starting to feel like I was making something real out of nothing. The small real estate deals I'd been quietly working on began to gain traction. I was picking up properties, fixing them up, and flipping them for profit. Investors were starting to take me seriously, and for the first time in a long while, I felt like I might be able to build something that was truly mine. But as things were starting to look up, the universe had a way of reminding me that nothing in life comes easy. It came in the form of a call from a lawyer. "Miss Ariana, we've come across some records that might interest you. It's about Ashcraft Plaza." Ashcraft Plaza. The name sent a shiver down my spine. My family's golden goose. The very symbol of their success. They had flaunted it for years, talked about it like it was their crowning achievement, their legacy. It was the one thing they held on to, the one thing they could control, and they never let me forget that I wasn't a part of it. But now, it seemed like it was within reach. I couldn't help but feel a mixture of excitement and dread. This was dangerous, too dangerous, but I had already come this far. "Ms. Ariana," the lawyer continued, "it seems there's a clause in the plaza's ownership that may be of interest to you. Are you familiar with the transaction history?" My heart raced. The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. Could it be? I had been quietly acquiring properties for months, building my portfolio slowly and strategically. But Ashcraft Plaza's jewel of my family's empire was a step too far. Or was it? I decided to take the risk. I had to. For so long, they had made me feel like I didn't belong, like I was never enough. If I could prove I could take back what they thought was theirs, I would prove that I didn't need them. Not anymore. So, I made my way to Ashcraft Plaza. Standing in front of that massive building, I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. The place that once represented everything my family had built, the place that had been their prize, now felt like a battleground. And as I stood there, staring up at the imposing structure, I found it the loophole. There was a hidden clause in the plaza's ownership records, a clause that no one had noticed, a clause that would allow me to claim a majority stake in the property. My breath caught in my throat. It was everything I had worked for, everything I needed to make the final move. I owned it. But as thrilling as it was, I knew it wasn't going to be easy. The risk was massive. If I made the wrong move, everything I had worked for could come crashing down. I couldn't let them know what I had found, not yet. Not until I was ready. And so, I kept quiet, played the game, and moved in silence. The days leading up to the Ashcraft Plaza board meeting were a blur of nervous energy. Every hour felt like it stretched on for an eternity. I had done the groundwork, gathered the evidence, and prepared my strategy, but that didn't make the waiting any easier. In fact, the closer the day came, the heavier the pressure felt. I'd built this empire quietly, piece by piece, without anyone knowing the full extent of my power. I'd worked in the shadows for so long, but now the time had come for me to stand in the light, to claim what was mine. The morning of the meeting, I chose my outfit carefully. It wasn't just a suit, it was my armor. I slipped into a crisp, tailored black suit, my heels clicking against the marble floor of my office building. The air was thick with anticipation, but I didn't let it show. When I entered the boardroom, I could feel the eyes of the Ashcraft family on me. The same eyes that once looked at me with disappointment and disdain were now filled with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. They didn't know who I had become. They didn't know the force I had become. The board meeting started with the usual small talk. Property evaluations, quarterly reports, market fluctuations. But I wasn't listening. I was too focused on the power that was about to shift in this room. I could feel it in the air, something was about to change. Finally, it was my turn. I stood up, calm and composed, but inside, my heart was pounding. I was about to do what no one, not even my family, thought I could do. "I'd like to address something that's been on my mind for a while," I said, my voice steady, but carrying a weight that I knew would be felt by everyone in the room. For years, Ashcraft Plaza has been more than just a symbol of success for your family. It's been a tool for control. It's time that power shifted. The room fell silent. I could see their minds working, trying to piece together what I was saying. The confused glances exchanged between Preston, Cassandra, and even my father told me everything. They had no idea what I was about to reveal. The truth is, I continued, West Pine Holdings Me Company has been quietly acquiring stakes in Ashcraft Plaza, and now we own the majority. The shock was palpable. The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Preston shot up from his chair, his face a deep shade of crimson. "You're joking," he spat, his voice thick with anger. "This can't be real. You're telling us you've been buying us out behind our backs? This is no joke," I said coolly, cutting him off. "The property you thought was yours is now part of my portfolio. You've been running this place with questionable practices for years, and it's time for that to end." I pulled out the documents one by one, contracts, proof of ownership, audit reports, and slid them across the table. The weight of each page was like a hammer striking the surface, making the reality sink in for everyone in the room. I could see them trying to process the information, their faces contorting with disbelief and anger. "This is impossible," Cassandra finally managed to say, her voice barely above a whisper. "How could you? How could any of this happen without us knowing?" "Because I was careful," I replied, my tone unwavering. "Because I knew how you would react." The tension in the room was unbearable, thick with betrayal and confusion. But as I looked at them, I felt nothing but power. They had underestimated me. They thought I was the girl they could push around. They thought they could break me. But they were wrong. "I didn't do this for myself," I said, my voice gaining strength with every word. "I did this for everyone you've stepped on, the tenants you've evicted, the businesses you've crushed. You may have had control over Ashcraft Plaza, but now the tables have turned." I could see the wheels turning in my father's mind. The calm, composed man who had always been the voice of reason in our family was now looking at me with a mixture of confusion and fear. "You can't just take this away from us," he said, his voice cracking. "No," I said firmly, "but I can take it back for the people you've hurt, and I will." For a moment, there was silence. The room was so still, you could hear a pin drop. But I knew that the shift in power had already happened. Ariana had made her move. The days following the Ashcraft Plaza board meeting were a whirlwind. Press releases, legal documents, phone calls, and meetings piled up faster than I could process. But through the chaos, I realized that West Pine Holdings wasn't just a business, it had become a symbol of what was possible when you believed in yourself and refused to let anyone define your worth. As the board members scrambled to adjust to the new reality, I could feel the weight of their eyes on me. They were no longer looking at me as the poor girl they once knew. Now, they were looking at me as a force to be reckoned with. The power had shifted, and now I was in control. But even as everything around me seemed to fall into place, a part of me couldn't shake the lingering feelings of doubt. The years of rejection, the long nights of questioning my worth, they still haunted me. The victory felt sweeter because it was hard-earned, but there was something deeper I had to face. Then, my father reached out. He hadn't contacted me in years. And, to be honest, I wasn't sure I was ready to hear from him. He had been the one who had rejected me in the first place, who had pushed me aside as if I was nothing. But there was something in his message that made me hesitate. "Ariana, can we meet? I've been thinking about everything, and I need to talk." I agreed, but only on my terms. We met at the same small cafe where we used to go when I was younger, back before the world became complicated. When I walked in, I saw him sitting at a corner table, looking older, a little more frail. He wasn't the imposing man he used to be, the one who controlled everything with an iron fist. Now, he was just a father. "Ariana," he said softly as I sat down across from him, his voice barely above a whisper. I never thought you'd make it this far. I was wrong about you." I didn't say anything at first. The hurt, the betrayal, it was still there, raw and fresh. But something had changed in me. I had built my life without him, without their approval, and I realized that I didn't need his validation anymore. I had already proven to myself that I was capable of more than anyone could imagine. "I didn't do it for you, Dad," I replied, my voice steady. "I did it for me, and for everyone who believed in me when you didn't." His eyes shifted, filled with regret. "I should have believed in you. I should have seen what you were capable of." He paused, his gaze dropping to his hands. "I was wrong. I know that now." It wasn't the apology I had expected or wanted, but it was enough. I could feel the weight of those words, and while they didn't heal all the years of hurt, they marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of a new one. We spent the next hour talking about the years that had passed, the mistakes made, and the lessons learned. But the truth was clear. I had already moved on. The power I had taken from my family was not just about money or status, it was about finding my voice, creating my own path, and never needing anyone's approval again. I left the cafe with a sense of closure I didn't think I'd ever get. Ashcraft Plaza was thriving under new management, and West Pine Holdings was expanding. But more importantly, I had built a new legacy that wasn't defined by my family's name, but by the person I had become. As I stood on the balcony of my new office, looking over the city I had helped reshape, I knew one thing for sure. Legacy isn't what you inherit, it's what you create. It's what you leave behind. And I was creating something worth leaving behind. If Ariana's journey inspired you, if you've ever felt the weight of others' expectations, if you've ever been told you couldn't achieve something, this is your sign to rise above it. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel for more stories of resilience, empowerment, and the kind of success that comes from believing in yourself. We all face moments when we question our worth, when the world tells us we're not enough. But just like Ariana, you have the power to prove them wrong. The best revenge isn't about getting even, it's about living your best life and showing everyone what you're capable of. Thank you for being here. You're not just watching a story, you're part of a movement. Let's build our legacies together.